Coming up on the ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis of how it impacts your school community. The trailer bill language is out following the governor's January budget proposal. What are in the trailer bills? We'll have our team of experts here to answer your questions.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And on a Wednesday, welcome you to the ACSA legislative lunch break, along with ACSA's executive director, Dr. Edgar Zazwata. I'm Naj Alikan, ACSA's senior director of marketing communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us today. Go ahead and jump onto the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today. Edgar, how are you?
Good. Back. Happy to be back in the chair, Naj. I know with so much going on, us getting into a rhythm of doing this for consecutive weeks feels like it's been a while, but yeah, I like the rhythm of knowing it's Wednesday and we're gonna jump on here for a half hour or so.
Yeah, always good to have a good conversation. Susan Denton, our first on the chat today. Mark Campbell, Jennifer Backman, Jared Hungerford. So good to have you guys on the show. Coming up in our second segment, we're going to bring on Megan Baer and Diana Vu from our ACSA Governmental Relations Department. We're going to talk about the trailer bill language. There were a lot of questions out there about what the equity multiplier was, accountability, transitional kindergarten, special ed. We're going to get you all of that information coming up a little bit later on in the show. Edgar, I wanted to touch just really quickly on a couple of news items that have come in over the last couple of days. Get your thoughts on it. The first one, there is 4 elementary schools in Marin County have had to reinstate their indoor mask mandates. Now, it's not for every one of the classrooms. It's just for some of the classrooms where they've seen small clusters of the COVID-19 cases going up. Edgar, your thoughts on this, because we're kind of hearing a change in the messaging in different parts of this country, even here in California, that maybe we've pivoted, maybe we've turned the page on some of this COVID-19 restrictions and thoughts and all of that. But it seems like there's still pockets out there where it's important for us to be vigilant when it comes to COVID.
Well, first part, I mean, my reflection is it feels nice that when's the last time we talked about masks on this show, right?
Yeah,
there was a day when that literally every week, all we were talking about was face mask requirements or what the state was going to do or one thing or another. So it's been a while since we went there, right? So I actually think that in itself is some progress there. I think to your question, Naj, yeah, and we're coming off of the latter part kind of winter season, of flu season, of RSV/COVID season. And it's what all the public health experts had kind of anticipated, that there would be a spike, and there had been, right? And it's as we saw last winter. With that said, I think there is, even though we don't talk about them a lot anymore, there is still public health guidelines out there that do state that when there is clusters of outbreaks or whatnot, what mitigation steps do you take into account? And I think what you're seeing there in Napa is that's the case. We occasionally get asked, well, would the state go in a different direction? I think we've seen it, right? Hopefully here we're on the latter part of this season, and as the warmer weather, hence the respiratory issues, go down. But it does remind me one other thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is a piece that us on the team, I know Megan, this is something that Megan has been working on for some time, of just reminding the policymakers that even in addition to COVID, that some of the attendance challenges continue to be an issue, right? That I think for a long time we thought, okay, well, it's because of COVID and, kids are going to be in and out. The one consistent theme that we hear about across the state is that attendance post the worst part of the pandemic still an issue, right? And I think it has for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you have the ebbs and flows of the virus or other viruses, even not just COVID. But I also think that there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of the public health messaging still, and then maybe how we continue to keep schools accountable as it relates to attendance. So what I mean by that is What do the public health experts continue to say? Even our school officials will say this. If in doubt, stay home, right? If you have a cold, if you're not feeling well, don't go to school. But at the same time, the state keeps schools accountable. That's how we get funded on how many kids go to school. So I think this is the challenge that we continue to have. Not to mention that aside from kids getting sick, one of the things that our school leaders continue to say that there's almost been a fundamental shift on like how some families think about attendance, right? That almost some families, for a number of reasons, got out of the norm of just going to school every day. And how do we kind of reconcile that? I think is an issue we're going to have to continue to grapple with.
Well, you know what, you just talked about attendance, and I want to bring up a good story. We got this out of the Stockton Record. Social workers, counselors, Stockton Unified staff, they've made more than 3,600 home visits this year. Now, before the pandemic, according to this article, the district's chronic absenteeism rate was below 20%. But the year after the pandemic, the year that COVID surged, that was up to 48%. But now all of these home visits have dropped that chronic absentee rate to 34%. So we are seeing, the more interaction, the more engagement that there is, the better it is for students to get them back in. I just want to read some of the particulars here. And this is from our good friends over at EdSource. They said after a student misses 3 to 5 days, caseworkers start calling and visiting the child's home to address whatever is keeping the child from attending school. They'll arrange bus passes, connect a family with local housing agencies, or take other steps to ensure the child can make it to class every day. So good work, Edgar, being done over there at Stockton Unified. I know from our viewers, there are probably a number of viewers who are seeing similar types of strategies, similar types of results happening in their district. But this is really good news out of Stockton Unified, and I assume that we would hear the same thing from other districts.
Yeah, I think you hit on the head. It's one of the best practices. It's, for all the talk about struggling, and obviously they're still having some challenges there in terms of numbers. I'm sure their numbers for chronic absenteeism are much higher than they would prefer. But I think it reminds me also, to follow up on the point I made earlier about the policymakers. I know our team sees this firsthand, that when there's been talk about changing maybe how we keep schools accountable. One classic example is folks talk a lot about enrollment-based funding and what that would mean. If we've ever heard a criticism from the state, is them thinking that by us disconnecting this lever of funding, that somehow schools are not going to do their part to try to get kids to school, right? So I think that's one of the pieces that I think we constantly have to be educating the policymakers about, showing them, look, here are the efforts that we're actually taking on to try to get kids to school. And yes, the numbers, even in this case, right, the numbers improve. There's still a huge impact to have that percentage of kids being cognitively absent. And this is a district that's I would say is going above and beyond in trying to get those kids to school. So again, not to beat a dead horse there, but I think it's one of these bigger issues, even past the pandemic, that I think we're going to have to continue to talk about.
Yeah, 3,600 home visits, and that chronic absentee rate over in Stockton Unified dropping. That's very good news. Just want to let you folks know, we've got a great audience participation coming up at the tail end of the show. So you do not want to leave, because we're going to need every single one of you to be part of it. Let's get to our main
topic. Say something like that, Naj, I get nervous because I have no idea what you're talking about. So I mean, I'll just wait for the surprise. Just like
I'm keeping you on the edge of your seat, Edgar. Whenever our viewers have the opportunity to participate, they aren't shy about it. Let's go ahead and talk trailer bill language right now. Let's bring our experts in. Diana Vu, ACSA legislative advocate. Megan Baer, ACSA legislative advocate. They are going in depth on all of this trailer bill information. They've spent days upon days, hours upon hours working on it, and they join us right now. Megan, let me start with you. The equity multiplier, that has been on the minds of so many of our viewers over the last few weeks. What do we know right now after the trailer bill language is out?
Thanks, Naj. Yeah, the trailer bill was released last week, and so we have a little bit more detail. So the governor is proposing to create an equity multiplier. That's what he's terming it. It would direct additional funds on top of the existing LCFF allocation to the state's highest poverty schools. Note, we're talking about schools. We're not talking about districts. So this is a pretty significant shift. LCFF over the last 10 years has really directed most funds to the district level. So we're seeing a pretty significant shift here. The proposal allocates $300 million, which sounds significant, but just, recall in the scheme of things, we're looking at over a $4 billion COLA right now. So it's not actually a huge amount of funds in the grand scheme of LCFF. The money would be split from TK through 8 schools that have a free lunch population of 90% or higher, and high schools with an 85% free lunch population or higher. I think a couple other important details that came out: the funds have to be spent on supports and services specific to that school. They have to be supplemental. They cannot supplant any existing services. So we're taking a look at it. We want to see, what schools would potentially get these equity multiplier grant funds. We think the rough math, it's about $870 per student, but we're in the process of doing some more precise runs to see where this money is really going to go.
Diana, good to have you back on the show here, and thanks to both you and Megan. I know as we talk about it,
wait a minute, Edgar, are you telling me you're not happy to have Megan back on the show? Is that what's going on?
Well, Megan, I think we just had Megan here, last week. I was actually going to give both of them credit.
Okay, sorry, I'll let you have it back.
I'm just long-winded and like to take the scenic route there to the compliment. No, but I was saying that so often the things that we get to talk about, whether it be here in this presentation, on this broadcast, in our so much of the content that we provide at our conferences, especially on the policy, and I know firsthand, having had the honor to work with both of these ladies, is really because of the team there. So just thank you for both of your advocacy on the front lines in terms of fighting these battles in the Capitol. And that goes to Megan and to Diana and to the rest of the advocacy team that on here. Diana, it's interesting, as we've talked over the last number of years, I mean, this focus on an accountability has kind of ebbed and flowed, right? A lot of attention on what the system was going to be. I think it kind of quieted down. Now I almost feel like this issue, and I think it's because of things that we've been talking about over the last couple of years, whether it be the test scores, the dashboard data, it feels like accountability is coming back into the focus. And this is going to be one of the issues, aside from the dollars. I would argue it's maybe going to be one of the most consequential pieces of this budget discussion this year. So with all that being said, I know that there was some changes that this trailer bill, and I know we didn't explain what the heck they talking about trailer bill. I know we've said this in the past, basically the details of what the governor proposed in January that we just got those last week. What did we learn on the accountability end?
Yeah, so absolutely. Thank you for having me back. I'm talking about everybody's favorite subject, accountability. And as Megan likes to say, I won the jackpot this year on the trailer bill language. So yes, there are quite a number of proposed changes with the accountability system. We like to say proposed because this is the governor's proposal for the budget. It still needs to be talked through with the legislature as well and kind of figure out what their priorities are. So everything we're saying now is not set in stone by any means. So with the accountability system, I'm talking about the system as in its entirety. It's the LCAP, the dashboard, differentiated assistance. The administration's proposal is really trying to revamp it so that's more meaningful and targeted. So again, there are quite a number of changes, and we won't be able to get into the weeds of everything, but here are some things that would be most interest to most people. So first, there's now a mid-year update for the LCAP annual update. So LEAs will have to present the update to their boards by February 28th of each year, and will have to include mid-year outcome data. If progress is not being made after 3 years towards the LCAPs, a change in the actions will be required now as well. It will also require metrics to be identified that will be used to monitor progress, and LEAs will be required to develop focused goals that specifies how they will take new or modified actions to improve or address an area of need if a school or student group within the LE receives a lowest performing indicator on the dashboard, or a student group within a school receives the lowest performing indicator on the dashboard. And the last eligibility is that the school receives the equity multiplier funding. A big change for the dashboard is it's being moved up from December to October over a 4-year period. And as for differentiated assistance, the administration is proposing a 2-year technical assistance cycle instead of 1. And it's going to include a review of the LCAP as part of that process.
Diana, I do have a follow-up question for you, but I also want to remind all of you that are watching the show, if you have questions for Megan or Diana, go ahead and put those into the chat. I see the page endo just put a question into the chat. If you've got anything, if you're wondering about anything, go ahead and put it there. Diana, what really triggered the administration to propose some of these changes?
Yeah, so it's been 10 years, as many of you know, since LCFF was implemented. And then although progress has been made, there are still very real equity gaps that none of us can really deny. And there are advocacy groups that have called over and over again for LCF dollars to be less flexible and more restricted. It's more of a similar to return to categoricals. The administration, however, is maintaining the LCFF's flexibility with this proposal. But with that said, they're also trying to be innovative with the other end of it, which is the accountability side, in order to try to move the equity needle. But it's not just administration. Legislators are also interested in shifting some of the focus from district level to school sites, as Megan had said earlier as well. So I think it's just a innovative way they feel like that we need to start making a change, and they're focusing on the accountability system.
Hey, Naj, if I could just double down on kind of what Diana just said there, because I think it's important as we all think about not what the governor's proposing, and also us thinking about what makes sense. Because and we all know this dance, right? Governor, legislature, they'll propose something. I think most of the time it is well-intentioned. And we have to think about what is this going to look like in practice. I think what Diana and actually Megan has made some of these similar comments, knowing where they're coming from, I think that context is going to be really important. Because I think as Diana just stated, 10 years, right? So we're LCFF for 10 years. They look at that. They try to look at some of the academic achievement data. And we knew this was going to happen. Now, there's some other variables that make this a tougher conversation, given coming off of the pandemic, given, the shortages, things that we talk about this show, challenges every week. But I think this piece that I think we should expect, we're seeing it over and over and over again, that I think that the Jerry Brown and that administration had a very different perspective in terms of how we're going to dish out dollars, how we're going to keep schools and districts accountable. I think this trend to be more localized is something we're going to have to just prepare ourselves for. Now, I think what we've been asking our members, help us look for the blind spots there. If there's issues with implementation that we may not recognize, please talk to us about that, while also recognizing the intent. And I think we could all agree that the intent there is a good one, right? If there's student groups that are continuing to struggle, I think what the state is asking, let's highlight what the plan for those students are. So I think just that contextual piece as we think about our response to advocacy, I think is going to be important.
Hey, Edgar, let me make mention of something. Apparently Facebook is having some issues right now, not ACSA's Facebook in general. So if you're watching on YouTube, good. But we're having some issues with Facebook. So if you're somewhere in the Facebook sphere and you're wondering why you're not seeing us right now, it's Facebook's problem. Jump on over to YouTube. Edgar, I interrupted.
I think I made my point.
Megan, let's dive real quick into special ed, because I know there was a piece of this involved in special ed. Can you give us a little bit more clarity right now on what the governor is proposing?
Absolutely. So the governor has a couple proposals as they relate to special ed, specifically the special education local plan areas, which we kind of refer to broadly as SELPAs. So first, it extends a moratorium on creating new single district SELPAs, and it requires some of the local plans that are submitted to be posted on the Department of Education's website. I think the more controversial piece that we wanted to highlight today is the governor's proposing that whatever SELPA spent last year on their member districts, they need to spend the exact same amount plus inflation. So the concern here is, SELPAs have member districts. needs change, different policies get rolled out. Our system is based on the local control. There's also collective bargaining. There's different reasons. Plus, the big one, declining enrollment. There's a lot of reasons that, your spending might change one year to the next. So we have a lot of concerns that this policy is really going to inhibit the ability of SELPAs to meet the needs of their districts and to do their own, programmatic oversight duties that they're supposed to be doing. So a lot of concern on this policy proposal.
Hey, Diana, I know we're seeing more districts launch their transitional kindergarten programs, even ahead of the full implementation deadline from the state. What changes did we see, if any, in the trailer bill in regards to TK?
Yeah, so there's actually not that many changes in the trailer bill this year, but there are two things we want to mention. First, happy to report that the student to teacher ratio for TK has not changed, so it remains 1 to 12. Second, there's a proposed new requirement that raises the bar for the second adult. It would essentially require them to have some sort of teacher preparation, but not necessarily a full credential. This requirement, if passed, would not become effective until 28-29 school year.
Hey, Diana, I want to ask you, I believe this has to do with accountability. Paige Endo asked, does that start this year or next? I think that's referring to some of the trailer bill language you were talking about related to accountability. Can you give us a timeline if some of what is proposed now makes its way through to the actual budget? Can you give us a timeline on when some of this would go into effect?
Yeah, sure. So, and Megan, feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but the budget, once signed, is enacted immediately. With that said, in regards to accountability, the state board needs to develop and approve like the LCAP templates and these new regulations. So I would imagine that they would try to timeline it with the next LCAP 3-year cycle before that begins again, but it's also kind of a quick turnaround as well. But it would need to be approved by the state board before it goes into effect. I would imagine like maybe January at the latest, but guessing still. We'll make that clear.
Always good to hedge, right? Somebody will call us on it. I have a question, I guess, for both of you, and maybe I'll start with Megan. So obviously we talk a lot about, and I think Diana said it very aptly, that this is a proposal that, the legislature has to go through with it, both on the budget piece of it, the money, and then all of these like policy changes. So I'd just be curious, one, maybe you could just remind the viewers what happens now. And then two, are we getting any sentiment from the legislative leaders, right? I know they're just starting to react to this, to dive into this. So much of what we've been talking about has been the governor proposing this, but now it's really in the legislature's hands. So I'll start with Megan, but I'm curious to get both of your perspectives on this.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're kind of at the beginning of the budget cycle. There's going to be a series of legislative hearings to take a look at the governor's proposals. The legislature will have their own thoughts and they will, push their own policy proposals as well. But that's when we're really going to get more insight to whether they like what the governor's proposing or not. And in our budget cycle, ultimately, a budget has to be adopted by mid-June constitutionally. So that's kind of when we see those negotiations come to an end. And, we're starting to get little inclinations here and there. There were some members that of the Legislative Black Caucus that have come out, stating pretty like broad support for the intention behind the governor's equity multiplier proposal. Although they kind of stopped short of like fully endorsing it. I'm sure they'll have their own thoughts on it as well, but they recognize his intent and appreciate that. So, but we're staying tuned and we're having conversations with them and trying to bring up these implementation issues that we're really looking at right now as we talk to the field and our members.
Diana, anything to add there?
Oh, Megan said everything really quite perfectly. I think it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, if any other members come out about it. I imagine most will take the Legislative Black Caucus's lead. We will see, though. So that really is a good indication on how this equity multiplier will look like later. I mean, and figuring out the kinks of it, I think will be part of our job, and then to be able to relay that. But yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna keep watching this.
All right. I just want to point out, Edgar, before we say goodbye, you will see plants on either side of Megan. You will see plants to the right side of Diana. These two are the most responsible for bringing nature into our office building. So I do appreciate that you guys have done this for us. Diana Vu, ACSA legislative advocate, Megan Baer, ACSA legislative advocate. Thanks to both of you for being here and for the information. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Edgar, also want to point out just a few names here, because I've noticed a number of names on our viewership today that I haven't seen before. So let me just go ahead and point them out. They may be loyal viewers. We just don't necessarily see their names on there. Ken Silman, Brenda Leone, Paige Endo, who we've mentioned twice, Mary Stark, and Raquel Kuzanoki. I'm going to apologize now for that pronunciation, but hey, welcome. We're always happy to have additional viewers with us on the show.
I will give you credit, because I think you've memorized every single person who has ever tuned in to watch Legislative Lunch Break and remember their names. So I know if there's a person to spot that out, it would be you. You're a resident historian here now.
You know what? I will say this. I happened to talk with the communications director over at San Marcos Unified end of last week. Had not corresponded with her at any point, but she said she's a loyal viewer. So I need to make sure that at some point we see her name up there. Okay, audience participation as we get set to hit the bottom of the hour. It is Super Bowl week. We would like some Super Bowl predictions. Go ahead and put yours into the chat. We hooked up with 4 members of our audience to get their Super Bowl prediction. So let's go ahead and pop those up right now. Tony Thurmond, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, a frequent guest here on the show. He's got Eagles 30, 27 over Kansas City. Erin Simon, ACSA President from Long Beach Unified. She's got Eagles 27-17. Susan Denton, Superintendent Principal at Hughes Elizabeth Lakes Union Elementary School District. Eagles 34-21. Jeff Oakes, Director of Alternative Education at Oroville Adult Education Center, has Chiefs 27-24. Okay. We are seeing the predictions here. Keep them coming, because especially if you put a score, Mark Campbell has it 27-24 Chiefs, which is exactly what Jeff Oakes had to say. Here's my prediction. Okay. And Edgar, you got to do this too. Yeah. Chiefs 25, Eagles 22. Write it down.
All right, 25-22.
What do you got?
The Raiders aren't in the Super Bowl, right?
No.
I'm just checking. No, it's been a while, probably will be a while. So, but because it's hard for me to root for the Chiefs or even think that they're going to win, I'm going to go Eagles 28, Chiefs 21. So
yeah, makes sense.
Oh, look at that, Terry Roofer. Maybe I copied Terry, or she copied me. So.
Well, you know what? I'm going to mention Terry in just a second. I'll also want to tell you, if you like what you see today, if you like our show, go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. You'll get alerts when we're about to come on, whether it's our regularly scheduled Wednesday show or when we've got breaking news. That is our YouTube sign up. If you have a story to share about what's happening in your school district, go ahead and email Michelle Carl, our EdCal editor, at mcarl@acsa.org. One of the features that we will have in this week's edition of EdCal, a note about our retiring superintendents, which includes Terry Ruford, who is on our chat today, one of our great viewers, our former ACSA Vice President for Legislative Action. We love Terry. Terry's been here my entire stint at ACSA, been a great supporter of this show.
We don't do popularity contests at ACSA, but I had to guess if Terry would rank up there with almost one of everybody's favorite people out there. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Congratulations to Terry. We're gonna miss her, but she's one. I have a feeling we're gonna keep her in the mix here, one way or another. So.
Something tells me that that retirement will not go as well as Terry and her husband are hoping for. But Terry and to the 20 other retiring superintendents. Congratulations to all of you. They will be featured this week in EdCal. All right, we have hit the bottom of the hour. We've got all of our Super Bowl predictions in place. Thank you, folks, so much for being with us.
Yes. Before you sign off, one piece, I know to end on a semi somber note, but I did want to give a shout out and proper recognition. The education advocacy community lost I would say a giant this week in terms of somebody who maybe behind the scenes everybody doesn't know the name, but Bob Blattner, who's a long-time legislative advocate, budget expert, consultant, worked with a number of districts from around the state, worked at school services, I think, for over a decade, had his own firm, and Bob Blattner and Associates. For those of us that got to work with him, I think we would all agree, probably one of the smartest men you would ever meet in terms of just really taking what's happening in the state capitol, dissecting it, giving that information back to our members. It's all a team effort up here in Sacramento. And we lost Bob this week. I know it's hitting hard. A lot of the folks who got to work with him, who got to interact with him. And aside from just being a policy wonk and a super smart guy, one of the coolest guys you would ever meet in terms of just always had something to share, always was quick with the quirk. So I know a lot of people got to work with Bob out there. I just wanted to share my thoughts and my condolences to his family and thank him for all the work that he's put in. Like I said, this has been so much of the policy that we talked about. He's had his fingerprints on there.
Yeah. Condolences from the entire ACSA family for that passing. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here, 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.